Aotearoa's Hauraki Gulf Marine Park, Tikapa Moana and Te Moana Nui a Toi, stretching from Te Arai to Waihi. Beautiful, biodiverse, unique in our world. A treasure for tangata whenua, it's always provided what we love and what we need. From above it looks spectacular, but beneath the surface, it's a different story. It's actually on the brink of ecological collapse. How did this happen? And what can we do? In this series, we'll take a deep dive into the Hauraki Gulf to understand what is making our sea sick. In this episode, we look at the beautiful relationship of Te Ao Māori and Tikapa Moana and Te Moana Nui a Toi. How could we fix some modern problems with some ancient wisdom? Prepare to be enlightened.
Ki tēnei tuku, kia hiwara ki tērā tuku. Kei whakapuru atonu, kei whakapuru atonu. O mai hara mai, piki mai.
Indigeneity or indigenous worldviews is kinship-based relationships with the natural world. The whole idea is our humanity is experienced and understood through relationships with the natural world.
The Māori, the life essence of things, both inanimate and animate, is an essential part of understanding Te Ao Māori. So the recognition that a kohatu on the beach, the sand, all has living essence, that it changes into other things is a form of life.
When they see a physical being, so it can be a fish, it has also a spiritual aspect to it as well that connects it to all the other parts in the environment.
This tree over here, it has a Māori around it, a wairua, a life force. Hey, there's an aura around it. Who's to say that they don't have a discussion or that they're not talking to each other?
So one of the things I see on the Pākehā side of my family is we don't ritualise our relationship to whenua as much as I do on the Māori side of my family. The Māori side of my family, we're constantly talking about our maunga, our moana, whenua and all that. We do that all the time. All things, natural phenomena, birds and bees and plants and trees, the water, human beings, we're all children of the earth and therefore we're all kin to each other.
Looking at the waters here, we do view it as a living entity. I guess we always mihi. We greet the moana, tikapa moana.
Some, depending on what tribe you come from, they had 70 atuas, different gods. And those atuas were people like Tane Mahuta, the atua of the forest. Tangaroa, he's the atua of the sea. Tāwhiri Mātea, he's that wind I can feel on my back. He's probably one of the only ata that oppose the separation of Sky Father and Earth Mother.
In 2018, this whole Thames coastline got wiped out. The major storm went through. So it was a catastrophe for New Zealand, for our community. For us, we're like, oh, the gods have spoken.
We understand the days of low energy, high energy, productivity through the phases of the moon and the relationship to our own bodies, our spirits and our well-being that are a fundamental part of the deep relationship with our environment, with each other.
There has been in literature and about so-called primitive cultures, of which indigenous cultures are usually the usual culprit. Pre-European Māori, for example, were incapable of rational abstract thought. I completely reject that. Yes, they lived within what today we would call a mythological worldview. Yes, of course. What I disagree with is the idea that they didn't also have the ability to abstract ideas, to create abstract ideas. And they had to in order to produce the kinds of things that they did.
We don't own the land, no one owns the whenua. We're only here, our mortal life's journey is to look after the nurture the sea, nurture the whenua, nurture everything that grows in and around us.
When you think about the Hauraki Gulf, most people might think of it as a marine park, as a place for pleasure boating and sightseeing. But when I look at the Gulf, I see Te Moana Nui o Toi, a body of ocean that connects all of us through our Whakapapa, our genealogy. If our Whakapapa is worth saving, then so too should be the Hauraki Gulf.
Whakapapa is kind of one of the great passions of the Māori world. It's a knowledge tool that articulates relationships between people and other people, and between people and places. It's through Whakapapa that I have a relationship to this particular whenua here. I also believe that that sense of rootedness in the whenua enables one to be more resilient in life, enables one to cope with challenges and problems. I can return here to be healed and strengthened and so on.
When we have any of our children that are not well, they need a bit of a boost, we come back and we bring them back here. Because of their whakapapa connections to place, we might get them some mussels from here and get them to eat it, because we believe that it's part of their DNA. They are one and the same. They're inextricably linked to the environment. And we believe that by eating and drinking the waters that come off the mountains here, that's going to have a positive effect on that person, on that descendant of this particular area.
We all descend from Ranginui and Papatuanuku, and all of that, we live in this thing called the woven universe. And understanding and knowing that brings a sense of empowerment and deep healing.
And if there was a centre of the universe, this is one of the places for me, back on our whenua here in Hauraki.
Living in the centre of the woven universe sounds incredible to me. So what happened when my European ancestors arrived? What changed?
We didn't have a concept of ownership in our traditional culture, such as we understand it today, and rights to land and things like that. But we did have quite elaborate arrangements which delineated people's relationships to certain places and their ability to go and harvest from those places. I often wondered what it must have been like for our people when they learn overnight that 10,000 acres has been sold and you can no longer go there. And they go, well, what does that mean? And they discover, no, you can't walk over to the other side of the river anymore. No, you can't harvest the birds up there anymore. And I said, well, why can't I? They said, well, because we got given 100 pounds. I can no longer visit the mountain where my ancestors is buried. We've been doing that for 500 years continuously.
The separation from our environment is a direct impact of colonisation and being displaced from whenua, from moana, and a lot of our people moved into urban areas where there's a total disconnect, not only to the environment but to our language and to our culture.
Well, I think we're too far removed from our own tangata whenua practices, our own indigenous practices. The world in itself at the moment is changing. There's more and more realisation that indigenous cultures and practices actually support a better environment and a better space for everyone to live in.
My tupunas arrived here just down the road in approximately 1350. We don't know exactly the date. The first thing our people did was conduct the rituals of what are called uru whenua. And these are rituals for gaining the mana of the land. And it's from that time our people have had what we today would say rights to water. So by the time you get to 1840 and the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, our tupuna understood that signing the treaty was just basically a confirmation of all of that and a continuation of it. But the Crown had other ideas. The Crown believed that in 1840, in signing the treaty, that the Crown could now assume the ownership of water, assume the ownership of the seabed and the foreshore and things like that. And of course, it was just a matter of time before those two ideas were going to clash. Yeah. And the Crown just went ahead and just implemented an economic system without any regard, run roughshod over all of those rights. And the consequences of this was basically the degradation of the environment. It was incredible impact. Colonisation was devastating.
When Captain Cook and Banks arrived first in Aotearoa, they observed Māori fishing at a level they had not ever seen anywhere else in the world. They were able to observe huge schools of fish along the shoreline, and the tohunga would say, no, not those ones, there's too much fish there. In fact, he directed them to a very small school of fish and said, there, capture that one. That is sufficient for the needs of our kāinga and our village. And right there's a difference in understanding of what is taken by a bulk fishing method. They were only used to capture what was required.
So it seems my European ancestors valued economic benefits by owning and farming natural resources. For my Māori ancestors though, it was about connection to nature through Matauranga Maori, which is grounded in understanding, respecting and protecting nature.
First and foremost, Matauranga Maori are just terms for a body of knowledge that our culture, our people created out of 600, 700, 800 years of living in this country.
When we're talking about Māori knowledge, we're not just talking about knowledge per se, it's localised knowledge, to place, but it's also about how it's passed down through the generations.
It's Māori knowledge, culture, values and worldview all considered together. And the difference between Matauranga Maori sitting alongside science is that science would just be the knowledge. So when we can think about the world as being explained by two different ways, the possibilities to me are absolutely endless.
Indigenous practices in Matauranga Maori is in sync or in harmony with the ecosystems as we live in them. They recognise that human beings live as part of that ecosystem. I think that one of the places where Western science so frequently falls down is that we remove ourselves as the observer or the participant from that equation. So it's well past time that we respected the Indigenous science of the land that we stand on.
They can give us a baseline of what this harbour used to be like. Those kinds of questions are really important for us to be able to answer. I think it needs to stand hand in hand with marine science.
I'm an ecologist, and as an ecologist, Matauranga sits very easily with me because ecologists try to look at the whole system and the impacts of one change on the whole system. Matauranga does much the same things.
When we combine that knowledge born of centuries of observations explained through connection with place and how things interact with scientific techniques where we can use technology and we can bring other things to the fore, when we bring those things together, we start seeing solutions and ways forward that you couldn't reach from either of those bodies of knowledge in isolation.
So if we look at seaweed, for example, with remu, that comes from ngā ngaru in many Whakapapa stories, which are the waves. You can't have healthy seaweed without wave action, and that's science. And so Matauranga Maori just puts a narrative and names around that science and observation.
So it's incredibly reliable, and for Westerners to come along in the last 100 years and try to say, oh, no, you know, you got it all wrong. We know what we're doing. Well, if we know what we're doing, how come we're in such a damn mess, you know? We don't know what we're doing. And that hubris, right? That scientific hubris.
The term Matauranga has been kind of tagged as science, whereas Matauranga is way more than that for us as Māori.
It was seriously impacted on through colonisation. You know, lots and lots of Matauranga Māori were destroyed altogether.
Back in 1907, we had the Tohunga Suppression Act, where we were deliberately not allowed to practice our culture, so we had to go in hiding. And a lot of our tohunga went in hiding in doing that. And we lost a lot of that knowledge base and a lot of that cultural practices. So it's through those that have been able to hide it and retain that knowledge and now bringing it out and teaching and taught within our schooling systems, which is fantastic.
Because Western science kind of overran everything and Western science informs everybody, including the Crown, we haven't been able to sit at the table with that, with Indigenous knowledge, so to speak. For us to grow the practice, to ensure that it survives, there's very few of us left that have been practitioners all our lives. We need everyone to just give us some space and respect us.
Recognition and respect for Matauranga Maori could help save our moana, along with kaitiakitanga, guardianship. Let's find out more.
Kaitiakitanga is an honour. All of the species that are Tanganoa's mokopuna, we have a responsibility to look after them. They don't have a voice, we do. We are the apex predator.
There's an inherent responsibility to kaitiaki to guard, to treasure, to look after those things that have been handed down to you. One of the strengths of Māoridom right across this country is our ability to come together, to call to action and say enough is enough.
So one of the tools of kaitiakitanga is the rahui, a term that's become more and more common in Aotearoa New Zealand in recent times. And so the rahui is a temporary restriction on certain activities, and in the ocean sense it would be a temporary restriction on harvesting either in an area or specific species within a certain area, such that the ability of that bed or that fishery to flourish and to regenerate was reached, and then the rahui would be lifted. It was a mechanism designed to ensure that you never got close to those tipping points. And so rahui, I believe, are an awesome tool for us to use and have been employed in recent times to really good effect. So in principle, that approach is part of Matauranga Maori, part of kaitiakitanga.
For us, if we've heard there's a rahui on, something significantly bad's happened. Traditionally, if you broke that rahui, the consequences were death. You just wouldn't do that. 500
years ago, if you went out into the Hauraki Gulf and you went fishing without asking permission, you would start a war.
We've had to adjust to time, and so now we go through a process of applying through the Fisheries Act, the 186A Fisheries Act, to comply and put those restrictions on so that it can be enforced.
This morning at dawn, Ngāti Manuhiri and all kaitiaki, all guardians who believe in the protection of our oceans, joined us and we laid down the rahui. It begins now.
The idea is that for the next couple of years nobody takes anything, no scallop dredging, no scallop diving, nothing at all.
And we as Te Ao Māori are also saying we will not take customary harvests until such time that these shellfish have recovered.
As a nation, we're just discovering how lucky we are, I think, at this moment, that we have this practice, this customary history that can be applied in such a dynamic, quick way. It's so much faster than the government can act.
I was simply ecstatic to hear earlier in the year that a rahui had been placed out on Waihi. There appeared to be almost unanimous support for it from the entire community.
Yeah, well, the Waihi Marine Project is an incredibly exciting prototype of what it is at place when mana whenua and the community work together.
The rahui covers no take on te ao, paua, kutai and kaura, and it goes 1 kilometre out. Those 4 were already practically extinct, so it's quite an easy yes to agree on those. And it's until we see that the ocean is coming into restoration that rahui would be lifted, and it may be lifted for a short period of time, monitor, and maybe placed down again. So there's a system to it.
If government is the only party empowered and authorised and resourced to do environmental management of the future, we're not going to get the change we want to see. And some of those alternative approaches have to be something to do with ground up, tangata whenua-led approaches of kaitiakitanga and things of that kind.
5% of the world population is indigenous, and they're responsible for preserving 80%, over 80% of the biodiversity in the world.
How are the 26 iwi of the Hauraki Gulf getting on?
We are all descendants of this place, and just like a large family, you have differences. You have different points of views.
The outside world needs to understand how also incredibly unreasonable the expectation that iwi would be all nice and coordinated and lovey-dovey with one another after 150 years of devastation of colonisation. Some of our iwi haven't even settled their treaty claims, so they're not even in a position to even resolve the past, let alone be in a position to come together nicely to solve the Hauraki Gulf. It's unreasonable and unrealistic to think, why don't you marriage just get your shit together? Having said that, I'm still hopeful. And there is a degree of unity amongst our iwi, and there is a degree of cooperation and collaboration.
What about customary take? There's a lot of misinformation.
In terms of the customary take, I think that's where it becomes quite contentious.
Because it can't be a free-for-all that there's this zone that is exclusive to a particular group.
Customary take is so insignificant in the scale of the harvest that it's not a meaningful conversation.
You know, within every species of that customary piece of the pie, we've never even gone close to catching the limits of our customary take.
I think if you look at what's actually happening, what action has been taken in the Hauraki Gulf over the last few years, it's mana whenua that are leading the charge. They have implemented rahui around Waihi, Coromandel. They know the problem and they see the inaction. And they will take on that role of guardians, kaitiaki of those areas.
We all need to be learning the importance of these things and the importance of respecting one another's cultures. And it's a slow process, but I can definitely feel really big changes.
Focus should be on the tamariki mokopuna, the children.
Yeah.
Because if you do that and you bed the importance of what we're talking about here, it's going to be a lifelong thing. They're going to get passionate about it. They're going to jump up and say, hey, something's wrong, you need to fix it.
We need to get out of the classroom and the Bunsen burners and get our kids into the ocean.
In the absence of government action, Te Ao Māori offers practical tools like rahui to help protect and restore the mauri of tikapa moana te moana nui a toi. As a kaitiaki, if we revive and incorporate Matauranga Maori wisdom, knowledge and wairua into ocean management, perhaps we could have the best of both worlds. In the next episode, we look at other uses for the Gulf, including how to get more out of our fish.